Hello, everyone, and welcome to Food Tank's webinar series. This is Sarah Small. I'm Food Tank's Global Events Director. I'm really excited about today's webinar. We're here with Patrick O'Neill. He's the CEO and founder of Amp Your Good. Today, his presentation will focus on how Amp Your Good is revolutionizing food drives with crowd feeding, a new way for groups to run food drives so that people can donate healthy foods such as fruits and vegetables. So this webinar will be recorded and posted on foodtank.com afterwards. You can also follow along and participate on Twitter using #FoodTank. Please also submit your questions using the questions box in your control panel, or email them to me at Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, @foodtank.com. So without further ado, Patrick, it's wonderful to have you here today, and I'm excited to hear your presentation. I'll let you take it away.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much, Sarah, and hi, everybody who's on the webinar. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Pat O'Neill. I'm the founder and CEO of Amp Your Good. And today we're going to be talking about crowd feeding. We're living in an age now where so many things are being reimagined. And at Amp Your Good, we've spent some time reimagining food drives to develop our crowd feeding concept. What I'm going to be covering today are the problems that we've seen in how food drives are run. I'll describe our solution, our crowd feeding solution, give you a little bit of sense of where we are in the process of engaging groups to use crowd feeding as a way to conduct their food drives, and then talk a little bit about our name and our underlying core principles at Amp Your Good, which is short for Amplify. So I guess I'd like to start off and talk about what we characterize as the food drive system here in the United States. And I would say there's probably not too many people who think about it as a system because, in fact, food drives are usually locally conducted, and there aren't really any organizing principles that would make one naturally think about it as a system. But it turns out when you start to think about it that way, it's quite large. Every year, more than 75 million people make at least one donation to a food drive. And they would be donating food to one of the millions and millions of food drives that occur around the country every year that are sponsored by some of the kinds of groups that come to mind when you think about food drives. So schools conduct food drives, faith-based organizations, many other kinds of groups. This time of the year is actually sort of the peak food drive season, so it's kind of nice that we're able to talk about this in the month of November. November and December is when a lot of groups decide to do sort of their holiday food drive. And all those food drives are being conducted to help supply the 90,000 hunger assistance organizations that we have here in the U.S., the food pantries and soup kitchens and whatnot. And collectively, the people who are donating, the people and organizations that are sponsoring these drives, and all these hunger organizations are trying to help the roughly 50 million people who are dealing with food insecurity. And so when you start to think about numbers like that, you wind up realizing that you've got a system that involves maybe somewhere between 40 and 50% of everybody who lives here in the United States. And one of the really terrific and sort of inspiring aspects of this quote-unquote system is that it really represents a huge outpouring of people who are looking to help others. And that's really terrific. The problem, or the problems, as we've thought about this system, really stem from the fact that there's a lot of inefficiencies and other attributes of food drives that we felt could be improved so that people could help in a better way. And so, I'm going to assume that most of you on the webinar have either participated in a food drive at some point, maybe you've run one, and you're generally familiar with how they work. And most food drives really work the same way. Somebody puts a collection box someplace, and then people are bringing food items to that collection box. And ultimately, the food in that collection box makes its way to a hunger organization. And that very, very simple model, unfortunately, has some real issues connected to it. For us, it really starts off with the idea that most food drives are limited to the collection of non-perishable food items. And non-perishables are oftentimes highly processed, fairly unhealthy kinds of food. Another problem is that a lot of the food, or a measurable amount of food that people put into those collection boxes, are actually not able to be used to feed someone. What might come to mind are canned goods that people donate past their expiration date, or things that get into the collection box and are damaged in transit between where they are and when they finally get to a hunger organization. Another reason why that food might need to be thrown away. And there's a bunch of other sort of nuts and bolts reasons or factors why over 20% of the food items that get donated are never used. So those are, we call them wasted good intentions. Now there are, if you Googled food drive problems or food drive critics, you'd come across some articles that different people have written that are critical of food drives because they characterize them as taking a lot of time, a lot of energy, which they do, and that they're sort of fundamentally inefficient. And one of the last problems that we sort of connected to food drives is that they have limited record keeping, meaning that, for instance, unless people are writing their name on the can that they put into the collection box, you actually don't know who's helping out. There are other problems that relate to the fact that there's not a lot of data that gets built into a traditional food drive. And that all adds up to a system that doesn't really work very well. And what we're looking to do is to take the good intentions people have to help and figure out how to do the most with them. I'll show you just a quick slide of, these are actual shots of food donations to a couple of different food drives that have been taking place this fall. And if you look at the little blue arrows, the picture on the left is a food drive for City Harvest, which is a really large and terrifically run hunger organization based in New York City. And somebody's donated a package of Twizzlers. The other photo is a shot of a food drive collection box where the donations that you can see, we've pointed out Pepperidge Farm Milano cookies, but there's Pop-Tarts, paper towels, and what you don't see in either of those pictures are any food items that you would characterize as really healthy and impactful in that way. So the core thing that we really have been thinking about is, given all this, why do people do it? Why do organizations run food drives? Why do people donate to food drives? And there's a couple of different answers to that, but the most basic one is that people really like to help out in this way. They like to help out in a way where they're donating food and they understand the impact that that donation is going to have, in that it's going to feed someone. There's different kinds of drives that many of us participate in that really work along the same principle. If you donate a blanket to a blanket drive, you feel like you're going to help keep somebody warm. Toys to a toy drive, you can imagine some boy or girl getting that toy and really enjoying it, adding some happiness to their life. And it's that connection of understanding what I'm doing, what I'm donating, and the impact that that will have, that makes for a good donation experience. And so people are willing to spend more time donating things because of that, because it's certainly easier to write a check and mail it in, or hop online and use your credit card or debit card to make a monetary donation. So people choose, though, to spend more time with their charitable act to deliver an item someplace because it just simply makes for a better donation experience. And so the question with respect to food is, you have people who are, with the best of intentions, trying to help those who are less fortunate. And how do you channel that really good intention to help out so it actually has the most impact that it possibly can have? So, so we thought about all this, and we came up with crowd feeding. And we took the name in part because more and more people are familiar with crowdfunding. And crowd feeding is an online platform that organizations use to run food drive campaigns, and people use to make donations to those campaigns. So it bears some similarity to crowdfunding. There are some important differences, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. And the thing that we thought about most was our perspective that hunger is really a health issue. Food insecurity often equals poor health, and that poor health manifests itself in conditions like obesity, diseases like diabetes, hypertension, cancer, other really significant health issues. And so the thing that we thought about the most was, you've got all these people that are interested in helping people who are food insecure. But the existing system, this way that we conduct traditional food drives, actually puts the people who want to help in a situation where the food that they're most likely to donate actually is not going to help the health conditions of the people who are dealing with food insecurity. And so how do you flip that around? So we devised a system that addresses most of these issues that I'm talking about with traditional food drives, which we call crowd feeding. And so if you're running a crowd feeding drive on our system, on our Amp Your Goods system, what it enables groups to do, what it enables individuals to do, is to use the drive to donate healthy, fresh, perishable food instead of non-perishable food. Or more specifically, it enables people to donate the kinds of food that are really needed, as opposed to those that are not. And so we have a wedding registry-like tool built into our platform so that we can ensure that every single donation that somebody makes through our platform actually matches the need, which means that there's no wasted donations, and the donations that are made are actually best suited for what the hunger organization that's going to receive that food is saying that it needs. We make running and donating to food drives very convenient, and I'll cover that in some detail in a couple of minutes. And we provide what we characterize as detailed records, meaning that we collect lots and lots of data in the context of organizing the drive on our system and the running of the drive, which is used in a variety of ways to get better results. So I want to spend a couple of minutes and just go through sort of the basic mechanics of how things work on our platform. And what you see now is a fairly typical food drive page. And for those of you who are familiar with crowdfunding, this is our equivalent of a crowdfunding page. And so in this case, it's an organization, actually a school, Oratory Prep, that is running a drive to raise food for an organization called the Community Food Bank of New Jersey. And if you are at a crowdfunding site, when you hit the donate or the participate button, what comes up are a bunch of choices of different monetary levels that you can participate in. And some of those monetary levels might be associated with a prize or a gift that you might get. Some of them are not. But when you get to a page like this on our site and you hit the donate button, that button in green, what pops up are food items that you can purchase right at our site. So you pick out the food that you want to purchase, you add it to your cart, and you go through what is a fairly standard e-commerce checkout process. And what you know as a donor when you're doing this is that these items that you have a choice to pick from are the exact items that that hunger organization has said that they're looking for. And so in the case of this drive, the Community Food Bank was looking for a variety of fruits and vegetables. In addition to that, they were looking for protein-based foods. So there are several listed that you can see on the screen. And from there, generally how it works is as a drive is going on, people are buying things. And when the drive is over, we take all the food that people have purchased to donate to that drive, and we deliver it to the hunger organization that's supported by the drive, typically about 2 or 3 weeks after the drive is over. And what you see there is just sort of a high-level description of how it works on our end. Now, when we were developing all of this, what we were thinking about a lot is we were thinking about the different perspectives of people and organizations that are connected to any kind of food drive. And so every food drive really has 3 different groups or participants. You have whoever it is who's sponsoring the drive, whether that's a school, a business, a civic organization, a faith-based group. You also have the community that's going to participate in the drive. And then finally, you have that hunger organization. And so we wanted to develop a system that for each of those groups and individuals had some particular benefits. So if you're thinking about our system from a sponsorship standpoint, if you're the sponsor of a food drive, there's a couple of key things that we have built into our processes that are worth mentioning. The first is that we make food drives really super easy to run and manage. Traditional food drives, again, the job of a sponsor would be to first put out that collection box. As the collection box gets filled, they're checking it, and when the drive is over, they've got to get all that food over to a hunger organization. So that part we handle entirely. And that leaves a sponsor really just able to focus on community engagement, getting people excited about the drive, getting them to participate. And I think for most people who are in charge of drives like this, that's sort of the funner, more interesting part. There's no glory in putting the boxes out and getting all the food over to the food pantry or the soup kitchen. Another important attribute is that it enables sponsors to reach their entire community, wherever they are and whenever they are. Again, with traditional food drives, you've got a collection box that is someplace. And at a practical level, really the only people who can participate starts off with the people who are close enough to where the collection box is for them to get to it. So if you have a community that's widespread across the county, across many states, across the world, your collection box is only going to be suited for those that are located close enough to it. And then secondly, people have to have time. They have to remember to bring the food to the collection box. They have to have the time to do that, which also places some limitations on who in the community can participate. So with our system, we sort of maximize participation, because wherever your community is and whenever they want to participate, they can hop onto your drive page and buy some food to donate. Engagement tools. One of the limitations with whether it's food drives or blanket drives, these kinds of drives that people donate things to, generally they're not able to use the techniques that are very successful in fundraising. And so the two listed here, contest and matching donations. I'll talk about matching donations for just a minute. If you can imagine a collection box with sort of a random assortment of cans of beans and cans of soup and boxes of pasta and a few other things, there's no practical way to match those donations. But with our crowdfunding site, sponsors can offer matching donations as a way to encourage more participation. Because when somebody buys a bag of apples on our site, we know that they bought a bag of apples. We know how much it costs. We know exactly how many apples are in it. So it's pretty easy to match that. And so these kinds of tools help to create more engagement within the community. We also provide a way for organizers, sponsors to track results. And that's really just a data collection and presenting that information so that if you're the person in charge of a drive, every time that somebody makes a donation, you can get a notification via text or email. You get to find out who those people are. It provides you an opportunity to thank them in a traditional drive format. Unless you're standing next to the collection box all the time, there's going to be people that make donations that you never know who they are. So it's great to know who they are, both to thank them and for the next time that you're going to do a drive, because those are the people that you'd really want to make sure know about it. We don't charge anything for organizations to use our platform, so there's no cost involved. But ultimately, all these things really just add up to the underlying purpose of any food drive, which is to raise a lot of food and make sure it's the right food. Now, from a donor standpoint, and I touched upon this a little bit earlier, we really combine a couple of things that we think are important to donors, all of which add up to what we believe is a terrific donation experience. We provide a very, very convenient way to knowingly donate specifically what's going to get to a food pantry or soup kitchen to help feed someone. So we provide a level of transparency and accountability because you know exactly what you're donating. Through our wedding registry tool, you know that it's the right kind of food and the most impactful kind of food. So the coupling of transparency and accountability with convenience and knowing your impact are all the things that are really important to most people who are thinking about making a donation. We also provide a tax receipt via email, so people have that for their records. And so we think that this is a very sort of holistic approach to trying to ensure that donors have a really good experience. Because what we know is that if you have a good experience doing something, you'll do it again. For the hunger organizations themselves, they just think it's great that they actually get the things that they need. There probably isn't a food pantry or soup kitchen out there that doesn't have their wish list posted someplace on their website, flyers on the wall, but invariably they get a lot of food that doesn't match their wish list. And so that's not a problem with, with crowd feeding because they actually get the things that they say that they need. We also provide them with some inventory management tools at a fairly simple level, but they're able to track the drives that are happening for them as they're happening on our system. And if you were to poll 10 or 15 food pantries or soup kitchens, and you ask them this simple question, which is, when do you find out that somebody is planning to do a food drive for you? The most common answer is, well, we typically find out about it when somebody knocks on the door and we open it up and they say, hey, I'm here to deliver a bunch of food. We just finished our food drive. So for them, it's great that they're getting the food, but they also don't have any, typically, any heads up on when it's coming. And they also don't know what's coming, even if they know that somebody is doing the food drive. They find that out when the stuff arrives at their door. With our system, as soon as the drive is over, we send a list of all the food that's been raised to the hunger organization. We're typically delivering all that food 2 to 3 weeks after a drive, so they know what's coming. When we ultimately deliver to them, it's on a scheduled basis, so they know the date and typically a 2 or 3 hour window when the food is going to arrive. And we help them reduce their costs. Traditional drives require them to inspect every single food item that comes in the door, some of which they're going to throw away, again, expired food or damaged food. So they're spending time sorting it. They're spending money on the things that they have to throw away because it increases their garbage bill. And like the drive sponsors, they also get to know who's donating to them, which is an important piece of information for them. And finally, there are no costs for them. There's no delivery costs that they have to bear. It's a completely free system from their standpoint with all these benefits that I've listed. So a little bit about where we're at. We beta launched our crowd feeding platform last year, and we spent about 9 or 10 months working with a variety of groups who were using it to raise healthy food. They were sort of our guinea pigs, if you will. We worked with them pretty closely to get a lot of great feedback, make some tweaks in our system, and really just improve it to a point where we felt we were ready for a regular launch. And so we actually launched our platform as a regular launch this past September. And along the way, to help us create awareness of what crowd feeding is, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of nonprofit organizations who are interested in the connection between diet and health and hunger, helping us get the word out about what we do. And so I'm sure some of the logos on the screen there are familiar to some of you. Everybody should recognize the Food Tank logo, of course. But we have some other terrific organizations that are sharing information about what crowd feeding is with their communities. And that's driving quite a bit of interest of groups that are have already started using our site or are planning to use our site to run their food drive. Just to give you a sense of some of the companies that have used our site to date, some of these names may be familiar with you, to you all. Obviously, some pretty big companies, UPS and AT&T. Some others that are maybe not as brand name recognizable, but we have quite a few companies that have used us to run food drives. We've had quite a few colleges, high schools, faith-based organizations, really just quite a few of the kinds of groups that are out there running food drives year after year, sometimes more than once a year. I want to talk a little bit about the concept of amplification. So Amp Your Good is short for amplify. And we had very particular reasons why we wanted to have the name of our company derived from this concept. Because in addition to having a way to make food drives work better to ultimately produce higher quality food for people who are struggling, we also have seen it as an opportunity to, at least in a small way, help address some of the issues that are sort of embedded in the whole food system as we all know it. And so we have ways in which food drives can be run so that they reduce food waste, support local farming, shrink carbon footprints. In the context of reducing food waste, there's really two parts to that. At a very simple level, by ensuring that every single donation matches the need, food pantries are not getting food that they then have to throw away. Probably the larger thing for us, though, is that we recently entered into a partnership with a company called Imperfect. And Imperfect is a company that sources and sells ugly fruits and vegetables. For those of you that may not be familiar with that term, ugly fruits and vegetables are really fruits and vegetables that are perfectly edible and nutritious, but don't meet the aesthetic requirements that supermarkets have to put on their shelves to sell to people. And so a lot of the food, a lot of the produce that's not sort of quote unquote good looking enough finds its way into the food waste stream. And these guys have figured out a way to source that so it can be sold and used by people. So we have a way for groups to run food drives in which they're raising fruits and vegetables that are ugly fruits and vegetables. And so you can raise healthy food for people who really need it, and at the same time help cut down on food waste. And similarly, we have other kinds of drives that can support local farms, shrink carbon footprints. And so the basic concept is you have 75 million people who all have really good intentions to help out. And how do you amplify this good intention that each of these people have? And so it's really through a combination of things. The kinds of food that can be raised through our site, I just want to talk about for a minute. So I've talked a lot about fruits and vegetables, but fundamentally, we're able to enable groups to raise whatever specific kinds of food they think will have the most impact. So we have groups that are, for instance, raising organic food only. We have other groups that are raising restaurant quality meals. Of course, we have a sort of kind of the normal stuff, normal fruits and vegetables, protein-based foods. But our platform is very flexible so that crowd feeding enables you to raise whatever it is that kind of food that's most needed and might most appeal to the people that are interested in donating food to help out. One thing I'd like to mention before I wrap up my presentation is the Real Food Drive campaign. This is something that we launched in connection with the formal launch of our platform. And so we launched it in September, and it'll run basically through the rest of this year, where we have groups around the country who are running food drives on our system, really designed to raise this healthier, real food. And our little tagline down there at the bottom is something that really seems to connect with people. Once you explain to people what happens with regular food drives, I think they pretty quickly get that if we can donate healthier food and people who are dealing with food insecurity are dealing with all these health issues, then it sort of just makes common sense to get them healthier food. So as a company, we have a very simple vision. We know that every year people donate billions and billions and billions of canned goods and boxed goods to food drives. So those are billions and billions of good intentions. We're just looking to change people's behavior a little bit, and instead of donating a can of soup or a can of beans, get them to donate an apple or a bunch of carrots or some other type of healthier food that's going to have a better impact. So that's it for the presentation. If you're interested in contacting us or following us, here's some information on this slide. Feel free to email the team here at Ampere Good. You can email me personally if you have a question or a comment or just want to find out some more information. Our Twitter handle is there, and the address of our website. So thanks all for listening to all that. I think there's a couple of questions that have come through. Sarah, we want to turn to Q&A at this point?
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Yes, definitely. So just as a reminder to our listeners, you can continue to send in your questions in the chat box or email them to me, Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, @foodtank.com. But we definitely have some to get through in the next 10 minutes or so. So I'd also like to thank you, Patrick, for a really informative presentation. And based on the comments of our listeners so far, it's definitely new to them, and they're really interested in trying to get more involved and become part of this new platform. So the first question comes from a listener, and they write, what jump-started this new outlook and process of how food drives can be carried out, and why is this new process necessary?
Yeah, so I think the seeds of thinking about it really goes back a couple of years. You know, one difference between, let's say, today and even 5 or 6 years ago is the number of people who are identified as food insecure. And those numbers have effectively more than doubled. So that today you've got somewhere between maybe 45 to 50 million people who are struggling with food insecurity. And in response to that, there were more and more food drives being run. But what's also happened over, let's say, the last 5 or 6 years is that I think people have increasingly become conscious and cognizant of the connection between what we put in our bodies and how we feel. And so we wound up thinking about, you know, the things that I described about how food drives work, and really just saw an opportunity to to think about them differently and develop a way that we thought would resonate with people to, you know, help them donate healthier, more impactful food.
Great, thank you, Patrick. The next question comes from a listener and saying, so it sounds like most people like to feel connected during their donation experience, but Amp Your Good has jumped over that hurdle using technology and creating a true connection with the donor. Can you talk a little bit more about the donor user experience and how the donation experience changes the landscape?
Yeah, so our connection to and how we think about people that are making a donation is that when people are going through the process of picking out the food that they want to donate, so I talked a little bit about making it convenient, and so you're buying something online. What I didn't really talk about is we have quite a few social sharing tools so that you can share with your own personal community that you're supporting this particular cause, why you're doing it, and maybe engaging others to participate as well. We also provide a series of touch points in that after you go through the checkout process to pay for the food that you want to donate, you get a standard email from us, sort of a typical e-commerce email confirming the things that you have purchased, what you're paying for them. But following that, we'll send you communiques that let you know how the drive is doing. You'll get an email when the food that you've donated has actually arrived at the food pantry or the soup kitchen, and a report on what this drive that you participated in accomplished. Again, with social sharing tools built into all of that stuff. So, when people put food in a collection box, that's sort of their last connection to the drive, so to speak. And they assume, I think correctly, that food that gets put in a collection box gets to a food pantry at some point. So we provide some extra feedback to let them know and keep them engaged in what's happening with the drive and what's happening with the good intention they express through their donation.
Yeah, I love that, Patrick. That's really great. And the next question reads, what type of sponsors have become involved in the Amp Your Good food drives? Where do you see the most interest, and where are the room for some exciting partnerships? And I think you touched on a couple of examples like the Imperfect partnership, but could you expand on kind of where the interest is greatest?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of pretty cool things that we're working on. I can't, in one area, I can't name names yet, but if you've ever gone to a concert or a sporting event where there's a food drive associated with that event and you're asked to bring a can of or a couple of cans of food to the concert or to the baseball game or football game, so we expect to be announcing probably after the turn of the year some partnerships where we'll have some pretty notable celebrities sponsoring food drives where they're asking their fan bases to donate food through our platform. And these are celebrities who really get the need to provide healthier food, and also kind of are aware that when you ask people to bring food to a concert, let's say, it's sort of anybody's guess in terms of what food shows up and how much it is. And the only engagement point is what's happening at the concert itself. So the idea is that, if you can imagine yourself, you're going to go to a concert of one of your favorite musicians in a couple of weeks, and you have the opportunity to participate in the food drive right now or anytime between now and when the concert happens, so that from the celebrity standpoint, they can engage their community over several weeks in this common cause to help people who need this kind of help. So those we expect to be announcing some of those partnerships once we get a few more details worked out, and that's probably one of the more exciting things that we're spending time on.
That's very exciting. I'm sure all of our listeners and myself included will be staying tuned for that announcement. We have time for a couple more questions. So the next one comes from a listener. It reads, it sounds like your platform has a lot more quality control. How can this potentially impact or reduce the number of hungry people in the US?
Well, I think that one of the things that we're trying to accomplish sort of, broadly with our platform is just the idea that one of the pieces to the puzzle of sort of generally improving the situation of people who are food insecure is to get them healthier food. Dealing with food insecurity is sort of a social issue, is pretty complex and involves a lot of different factors, but there's a really strong correlation between eating unhealthy food and having health problems. And then once you have health problems, that kind of affects everything. If you develop diabetes or hypertension, there may be work available for you to do, but you may not be physically fit to do it. So you can't have a job. And if you don't have a job and you're not making money, how are you going to, sort of pull yourself or get out of these, maybe tougher circumstances that you're in? So we see food as a fundamental piece of broader things that are solutions, and that's sort of our part of it. Sarah, I noticed the question: how are you most likely to donate to a traditional food drive, online food drive, etc.? Do you mind if I take that one? Because I'd like to. So one of the things that's been really cool that we've found out is that when people are donating food through our platform, they're typically donating what would be the equivalent of maybe 3 or even 4 bags of groceries. And this compares to anecdotal reporting that we've heard from many people, that when they participate in a regular food drive, they might be bringing a couple of cans to the collection box, or maybe 1 bag of groceries. And so we're seeing people donate a lot more food through our platform than they would if they were participating in a traditional food drive. And that goes to the experience of the donor. And in simple form, one thing it means is that if somebody else will carry the food for me, I'm willing to donate a lot more food, because it's hard for me to carry all that food myself. So we think that's a big piece of it, and we think people are inspired knowing that they're donating the right stuff, because those are the choices that we provide for them.
That's great, Patrick. And then we just have time for one more question, and I'm going to take this one. So how can our listeners that are tuned in today spread the word about Amp Your Good, or how can they start participating right after this call?
Oh, great. And thanks for that question, Sarah. So there's a couple of things that we would ask you to do. One is that you can come to our site and sign up for our newsletter. We send out information about what we're doing and how people can help through that. You can follow us on Twitter. Again, the same thing. But generally, what the information that we are putting out is information that we hope people perceive as very shareable. We're really trying to grow a community of like-minded people and organizations that recognize that getting healthier food to people who are struggling with food insecurity is an important thing to do. And that, we have a way to do it through our platform. So, whether you are thinking about maybe sponsoring a food drive, we have individuals that do that also, or maybe your organization, or maybe you know of an organization. I mentioned before, November and December are the most popular food drive months in the United States. So if you're connected to an organization that is thinking about a food drive, please make them aware of us. And if you're inclined to donate to a food drive, we've got many that are ongoing that are supporting different organizations around the country. You can just visit us at ampyourgood.com, or you can go to realfooddrive.org. I didn't list that on the slide, but that's another place to visit on our platform. And find a drive you'd like to maybe participate in, buy some healthy food, and we'll get it delivered to a place where it's going to really help someone.
That's great. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to get involved or maybe even host a drive themselves. So unfortunately, we've run out of time for today, but thank you so much for joining us today, Patrick. And thanks to all of our listeners for sending in really great questions. It was truly a pleasure to have all of you here. We'll have more webinars coming up. You can register for them today on foodtank.com. So thank you to everyone again, and have a great rest of your day.